Hello everyone and welcome to our very first online webinar. We're very excited to have you here. We're going to get started at about 7:35 just to give everyone plenty of time to get logged in. So make sure you're settled, grab yourself a tea or a coffee and we'll begin very shortly. Whilst we are waiting, please do make sure you're following us on our social media pages. There you can find latest updates about what's going on in all of the nurseries and also find out about our future events, which I'll get a bit more into later. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Hopscotch Nurseries. Okay, just let you...
Hi everybody. Thank you all for coming along this evening. And isn't it nice? It's 7:30 and it's still light outside.
It's lovely.
So good.
So much nicer.
I know, even though it did snow today.
Very strange weather.
I know.
Very strange.
Really
Can't
weird.
really predict, can you?
No, totally.
Okay. I can see we've had a few more people join us.
Brilliant.
Okay, so let's get started. To anyone who's just joined us, thank you for joining us for our very first webinar for our food focused evening. My name is Amelia and I work at Hopscotch head office as the Hopscotch marketing manager. I'm shortly, some of you will have already met and seen Fran, I'll shortly be introducing her properly to you, but first I'm just going to go through a few bits of housekeeping. As this is our very first webinar, please bear with us if we experience any technical difficulties. We'll try and get things back up and running as quickly as we can. Please note this webinar is being recorded, so if you do lose connectivity for any reason, you will be able to rewatch the full session on our website. We'll ensure that it's promptly uploaded after this evening. Please be aware that you do have the option to have your camera switched on or off. Feel free to select whichever you feel most comfortable with. Throughout the webinar, everyone but Fran and R's microphones will be switched off, so please do make use of the chat function if you have something that you'd like to say. If you're using a desktop, you can find the chat function in the top right hand corner, just along from the leave button. And if you're using a mobile device, you'll be able to access the chat function pressing the 3 dots next to the end call button. If we can help you with any technical issues during the webinar, please use the chat function and let us know and we'll try and help you as quickly as we can. We will be having an allotted time period towards the end of the session for a question and answer segment. So please feel free to send in your questions in the chat box at any point during the webinar. I think that should have covered everything. If you do have any further questions, please just drop them in the chat box and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Okay, I would now like to introduce you to our host for the evening, Fran Taylor, aka the Brighton Nutritionist. Fran has over 10 years experience in child nutrition. She is a registered nutritionist with the prestigious Association for Nutrition. She has worked with children's centres, the NHS Start for Life campaign and delivered many online and in-person weaning workshops, including practical sessions at the Brighton and Hove Food Partnership. She is also currently working on an EU-funded scientific study called Bump to Baby. So, as you can imagine, we are very excited to have her here with us this evening. Welcome, Fran.
Thank you, Amelia. That was a lovely introduction. Thanks. Hi everybody, thank you all for coming along. So yeah, as Amelia said, I've worked with children and families for over 10 years and I've worked in Brighton for all that period of time as well. I am working on a study called Bump to Baby, as Amelia touched on. So this study focuses on health and nutrition for the first 1,000 days. So that's from conception through to age 2. And the reason being is this is the most significant period in a child's development and has more influence than any other period in their life. So this brings me on to congratulating you guys, because the very fact that you are here means that you do care about how you feed your children. And this means that they'll already be doing okay. You know, there is so much information about nutrition and children and how to feed, and so much stress and so much pressure. And I totally get that, because I'm also a mum of two. Mine are teenagers now, but I had different experiences. My eldest was tube fed at the time of weaning and had lots of medical complications. My youngest was only 15 months younger and ate everything. So I had very, you know, I experienced the whole gambit of anxiety and fussy eating and stress, and not at all as well. So I kind of understand some of the stuff that you may be wondering about and going through. I will try and make this interactive, you know, so I'm not talking for the whole time. So I'll get you to kind of put in some stuff in the chat. As Amelia said, do ask questions throughout the whole thing, and I'll do my best to answer as many things as I can. But let's start by sharing my screen. Let's see if we can start. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, can you all see that? Amelia, can you give me a yes if you can see that?
Yes, I can.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, we're starting. Okay, as a quick aside, my main computer didn't install, Teams wouldn't work on it, so we've had to quickly get a new computer. So we managed it. So hopefully it's all going to go okay. Okay, so what we're going to cover today or this evening is Weaning 101. We're going to look at getting the basics right, what to focus on and what not to worry too much about. We're going to also look at fussy eating. So why does it happen? What can help? And essentially why you shouldn't stress too much about it. And then hopefully, if we've got time, we'll try and discuss eating well as a family. So looking at a balanced family plate and principles for happy eaters. If your kids are past weaning and you're not that, you know, you're not that interested in that side of things, if you want to kind of come back in about 15 minutes, please do, by all means. But we'll also be talking through the weaning thing around some principles around how to eat well as a family as well. I really want you to come away tonight not overwhelmed and not stressed about what you're not doing, but actually feeling, you know, less stressed. There might be some things you may want to tweak a little bit, but hopefully you'll come away feeling that essentially you're doing okay. Okay, so Weaning 101. It's an overwhelming time, isn't it? There is lots of people telling you when you start weaning, like what they did, what you should do. And this can be really helpful and it can be really unhelpful as well. Please do pop in the chat any questions or any things that you're confused about, and then we'll see. I'll see how much I can cover. Okay, so when's the right time to start? Public health recommendations are 6 months old, give or take a few weeks. There are signs of readiness include things like leaning forwards and opening your mouth if you're, you know, a baby opening their mouth if they're offered a spoon, and showing interest if others are eating. But key milestones needed is they need to be able to sit up unaided, and they need to be able to hold their head, and they need to be able to pick up food and bring it towards their mouth and swallow food. So babies who aren't ready yet will do the tongue thrust motion, so they will push food out of their mouth. So they need to be able to swallow food. What are not signs of weaning, and something which is a common one, which a lot of people confuse as, oh, they must be doing this because they're needing food, is waking up in the middle of the night at around 4 or 5 months old. And there are many reasons why this may be. It could be because of developmental milestones or teething, or they want to cuddle, and food usually isn't the answer. You know, you don't wake up in the middle of the night wanting food. Well, you might do, but it's not that common. So if you are worried that they are that they're doing this because they are needing more energy, then you could offer an extra milk feed at this point, which would be more satisfying and give more energy than a few mouthfuls of food. So 6 months old, give or take a few weeks, is the recommended time. So it's an exciting time for you and a brand new experience for your baby. So putting some small things in place can help you both enjoy it. So you making time for it, so making sure you're not doing it when you're thinking, I've got to do this in half an hour and I've got to do that. So a calm, quiet space where you're relaxed and you're able to focus is helpful. And babies are calmer and more relaxed when you are. So getting the timings right is another thing. So I don't know about you, but if I'm over hungry or tired, then a new experience for me is not the best time to be doing that with me. And the same's the case with your baby. If they're too tired, if they're too hungry, or if they're not hungry at all, a brand new experience like feeding means that they might not engage very well. So let's go on to baby-led weaning versus spoon-fed weaning. Put your thumbs up. I actually can't see because I've got my full screen on, but Amelia can share it with me. But put your thumbs up if anyone feels confused about this. And there is some people along the baby-led weaning camp that can be quite militant that is the right way to do it. So I am here to say, if you've got one preference over the other, then go with that one. But be prepared to let your baby lead you as well. Some babies love finger foods from the off, but others may need a little bit more guidance and a slower approach. So you actually may want to start with purees if you are a little bit anxious about the baby-led weaning. And if that is the case, then do that, because providing a stress or lower stress environment around a new thing and around feeding is kind of tops what you give them. So you can offer both. There is kind of some myths that offering purees along finger foods increases the risk of choking. That is not the case. It doesn't overcomplicate things. It doesn't add confusion. And you can teach teach independence and self-feeding with purees. So I think the key is not to expect a perfect journey, and don't compare your baby to another one, because what I will bang on about throughout this is that everyone is unique. You are unique. How you eat is going to be different from how your friend eats, and that's exactly the same for your baby as well. In terms of baby-led weaning, it can be helpful in terms of hand-eye coordination. They are more able to regulate their own food intake, which is really good. It can increase variety and sensory experience, and it can give better exposure to family foods earlier on. But spoon-fed, starting with purees first, means that you are more likely to offer iron-rich foods to your baby. You're able to offer a wider variety of foods. There's less mess, and that might be something that is appealing. And you have a better idea of what your baby's eaten. But the thing is do what's right for you and do what's right for your baby, and be prepared to be flexible. And I think if you go with it in that way, then that's, it's less stressful, essentially. Okay, so when we're talking about weaning, it's quite common to start with fruit and sweeter veg, because things like sweet potato and carrot and things like that, because they mash well and babies tend to like them. But before you start with that approach, you might want to, so there is the latest evidence, which is a couple of years old now, but still pretty new in the weaning world, around starting off with more bitter vegetables first. The reason for this is that breast milk is naturally sweet, and we have an innate preference for sweeter tasting foods. It's kind of down to our kind of survival instincts. But new research has shown that introducing bitter tastes first and sweet tastes later actually helps develop acceptance and greater tolerance for bitterer tasting foods. So this could mean that your baby will have a wider palate and more acceptance of these foods. So things like broccoli or green beans or cabbage, kale, spinach, potatoes are all good ones to try. And when I run this workshop at like with babies who are just starting their weaning journey, and they've been in the Brighton Hove Food Partnership, and we've actually done, you know, their first foods with this, and the faces when you give the babies these foods it's you know, quite an expressive face, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't like it. It just means it's a brand new taste and experience, and they're reacting to that. Because I don't know if, would anybody like to take a guess on how many tastes it takes for a child to get used to a new taste and decide actually if they like it or not? Amelia, you can shout out to me.
Yeah, I will do. I'll see if we get any.
Anyone willing to guess?
10. We've had dozens. 10 or dozens.
Yeah, pretty much like 10, 15, 20 times to decide, actually to get used to it and decide if they like it or not. And sometimes, you know, like us, I do like mushrooms now, but I had years and years of trying myself to like mushrooms, and I just didn't like them. And no matter how many times I tried it, you know, they just weren't for me. And that's okay, because we do like different things, but not being put off if you try it once or twice and it's not very well accepted. Keep going. You know, does it matter if you don't do this, or if you're on the weaning journey and you haven't done this and you think, oh my God, well, that means I've failed. They're going to just want ice cream for breakfast. No, it really, how you feed your child and how you want your family to eat in the long term is as important as what you give them. So it could be, you know, starting with bitter veg first doesn't mean you're going to have a fuss-free eater, but it might mean that they go through, you know, they might have more tolerance of these foods or reject less foods, but it doesn't mean that you're going to have a perfect eater at all. And if you haven't done this, then it really doesn't matter either. It's about how you feed your child in the environment that you bring them up in is as important. Okay, I've just gone through that. So some ideas for first veg ideas. Balanced weaning diet. We want babies to be exposed to a wide range of foods, different fruit and vegetables, different variety of grains and proteins. I'm going to skip through this, but you'll have this information just because I am conscious of time. Foods to steer clear from and choking risks. So you want babies to have very small amounts of salt. If they're exposed to salty tastes early on, they can develop a preference for these tastes. Honey can cause infant botulism, so it's not for under ones. And you can offer nuts, and you can offer them early from 6 months, but make sure you're offering a nut butter or, you know, something with ground nuts in, not whole nuts. And mold-ripened cheese can cause, you know, is not good for babies either. This is a really nice slide. So Charlotte Sterling Reed, SR Nutrition, she is on Instagram, is a I worked with her in Brighton, actually. She's a really good child and baby nutritionist, and she has a book as well. But if you want ideas of like recipes and meal ideas, then she's a really good person to go to. And this is a really nice thing that she's developed just around how to prepare food so you are reducing choking risk. I mean, choking is something to be aware of, but don't let the fear of your baby choking put you off giving them a variety of food. Just be mindful of how you prepare it so that the choking risk is minimized. And if you are concerned, and something I would recommend is doing a baby first aid course. How much should you feed your baby? That's a question that gets asked all the time. But I am not going to give you prescribed amounts because, as I've said before, babies are all really different and will really vary in the amounts of food that they have. And, you know, they all go through developmental stages at different times. Appetite can change depending on sleep or teething or illness. And you are not, and I'll say this a number of times, is you are not responsible for how much your baby eats. They have really good hunger and fullness signals. So you don't, you know, let's not override those. But what is helpful, and some guidelines, is rather than thinking about how much they're eating, thinking about the range of foods that they are getting. So are they getting foods from a variety of foods from the different food groups? Are they getting different types of fruit and vegetables? And we'll talk about that again in a little bit more detail in a minute. But trusting their hunger signals and learning to read their hunger and fullness cues, you know, if they want more, if they show signs of having enough, equally leave it. You know, if someone tries to force feed more food on you when you're full, you know, does it feel good? No is the answer. Eating with them as well. Food is a social activity, and as humans we eat together. It provides connections and it provides trust for babies and children. They learn to role model what they see. So in the first stages, you might not want to sit down and have a full meal when they're just starting their weaning journey, but if you eat some of the food that they are having, it teaches them that it is enjoyable and normal to eat, and that's obviously a good thing. And all babies and toddlers are really different and they vary in their appetites, and you know, that's how much, you know, when you progress from one meal to two will depend on, you know, how you feel comfortable in and how they're used to that whole new experience. So when you and they feel more comfortable, you might want to move on to 2 meals and then see how that goes, and then move on to 3. And for, you know, it might progress really quickly or it might take a bit longer. There isn't a strict schedule. And then before we move on to fussy eating, let's just quickly talk about how some questions to ask yourself. And it might be hard to think about, but it is well worth thinking about, because how you feel about food and how you want your meals times to look like and how you want your child's experience to food to be are important questions to ask yourself. And thinking about, when you think about that, how actually you role model that behaviour. You know, what were your experiences like, and you know, do you want to repeat those, or are they things that you really don't want to repeat? And if you co-parent, you know, does the person you co-parent with have that same experience? Are you coming from the same page? It's an important thing to consider. And finally, there is no perfect way to feed your baby. So whether you cook from scratch or you get it out of a packet, or you have it fresh or canned or frozen, you buy a ready meal, you might buy organic, do what works for you and your family. And from one day, you know, if one day you've cooked something from scratch, but the next day you haven't, and you've got something out of a packet, then that's okay. You know, if we set ourselves up to be perfect and we don't do that, then we set ourselves up to fail. You know, allow yourself to be real. I think nutrition and feeding is not a one size fits all approach. Okay, how are we doing for time? Blimey, it is cracking on, isn't it? Right, fussy eating. If you search fussy eating on Google, there are millions of suggestions, aren't there? Which is kind of comforting, because fussy eating, especially as they hit toddler age, is really, really common. If you reject certain foods, eating a range of limited foods, not trying new foods, slow eating, not enjoying meal times, they're all signs that your child might be going through a fussy eating period. Not that your child is a fussy eater. And there are a load of reasons why this might be the case. So if they are having too much milk, and that means that they're probably not hungry enough to eat as much as you think they should, or the variety of what they should be having. An unstructured meal routine, by having too much snacking, and they're not prepared for meals at certain times, can affect it. If they're tired, if they're over hungry, if they're unwell, and if there is pressure to eat certain foods or eat up a certain amount, then that can create fussy eating. If there's too much on the plate, if you're sat down to a massive plate of food, it might affect your appetite and how much you want to eat. And exactly the same for a baby. And eating alone, we are people that like to eat together. All humans like to eat together. Another reason is when they hit one, their growth, the period of growth slows down slightly, and so that can affect. So as a baby, they might have eaten anything that you put in front of them, and then when their growth slows down and therefore their appetite slows down, that causes them to be a bit more selective in what they choose to eat. And it varies from one day to the next. So what can help? Eating together. I'm going to go through this quickly and then I'm going to go into it in a bit more detail. But eating together, being calm and having a calm environment, reducing distractions, giving them control, using the right language and not pushing it are all useful strategies to try. So children are sponges, aren't they? And they soak up your every movement, and they learn how to eat from you. So if they don't see you eating, they aren't going to understand the importance of eating a varied, balanced diet. They're not going to see the skills on how to eat and how to enjoy food. But it doesn't need to be every meal or even every day. It might be you sit down once a week on a Saturday lunchtime or a Sunday lunchtime. But if you sit down together as a family and chat and have fun and focus on connected and not on how much you're eating, that makes a mealtime a positive experience. And if you eat the same foods, they're going to role model that. I totally get the worries. I've said I've experienced it with my kids, an anxiety of getting a child to eat. And my eldest was caught up in the disability too, which added to my stress. And this made mealtimes, to be honest, for a period of time in my house, really not much fun. But when I stepped back from this and kind of had a word with myself and took the pressure off her actually eating, it made it so much nicer, because I made sure I stuck to a regular meal time and I was varied in the foods that I gave, but I took the pressure off eating up. And I relaxed and thought, okay, I know that she'll get what she needs from other ways if that isn't working. And it made it a much more enjoyable experience, and it meant that she was able to try more stuff because she felt less stressed. Because you know yourself, when you're at a meal table and you're stressed, it isn't a very enjoyable experience. And I'll say this kind of a number of times, that it isn't your job to decide how much your child eats. They are really good at deciding that themselves. And so this brings it on to giving them some control. So this follows the principle. So it's a woman called Ellen Satir, and it's division of responsibility in feeding. Excuse me. And it's a useful framework to follow when it comes to feeding and eating. So it breaks down, excuse me, I'm just going to have to drink water. It breaks down the different roles and responsibilities of the child and the parent. So you decide where the food is eaten. So it might be on a table or in the garden or on the move. You decide what is eaten. So a variety of foods from the different food groups, and familiar foods and new foods. And you decide when. So a regular routine with set meals and snacks. The child decides whether they want to eat and how much. So kids like autonomy, and this gives them a sense of control, but ultimately you are the puppet master, because you are choosing what goes on the table and they choose what goes on the plate. And it is quite a you know, for some people, a really different way of feeding a child, and it can, you know, some people are really not comfortable with this, but it is something that I think is quite a nice principle to work from. It might be actually you'd like to give them some control, not in that way, but an element of control, like asking, for example, would you like peas or carrots with your fish cakes? And again, to reinforce, it isn't your job to decide how much your child eats. Your child has really good hunger and fullness cues. How we speak about food is also important when we're coming to fussy eating. So putting some foods on a pedestal and others as naughty or more desirable, good or bad, will have some impact on a child's desire to eat certain foods. And it's really hard though, because we are products of our upbringing, aren't we? And if we are brought up in a certain way, then, you know, we emulate that behaviour. But try to limit phrases like, if you eat this broccoli, you can have some pudding, because immediately pudding is seen as more desirable than broccoli. And labelling a child as, oh, they are a fussy eater, means that becomes part of their identity, rather than they are going through a period where they are being a bit more selective about what they're eating. So try and make all foods neutral. So phrases like, if they only want pasta and they're wanting pasta all the time, but you're saying, oh, that's not on the menu tonight, why don't we have this, and we'll have that on another night. Tonight we're having this. Describing how a food looks, not in the fact that it's good for you, but actually it's crunchy and green. Because again, if you're thinking it's good for you and you talk about another food and you don't say it's good for you, then they pick up on those things. Any pressure at the table can impact a fussy eater. So trying to get them to eat the things that we want can make meal times less enjoyable. We want a calm and a pleasant space. So even phrases like, oh, look, this is my favourite. It's so good for you. Oh, I think you're going to love this. Sound quite positive, but actually can still, for some kids, add pressure. And also, if you aren't being real, if you're saying, look at these carrots, they're delicious, but you hate carrots, they never see you eat carrots, it doesn't land so well. So being as neutral as possible can be helpful, but you can totally legit eye roll at your partner when they're not looking, if they're being annoying. And that kind of just one bite, come on, just try a little bit. Again, if that, put yourself in that situation. If someone was trying to do that to you, then it wouldn't potentially be the best way to try and get you to eat something. And if you think, if someone's pushing and you push back and they're resisting and you resist against them, then you kind of hit a stalemate, and that means that you're not as likely to do what you want to do. And obviously I use this image of this woman holding her child's head back while she stuffed foods in her mouth. And again, do keep offering previously rejected foods. So just because you tried them with cabbage and they didn't like it, it doesn't mean that they don't like cabbage. It just means at that time they weren't that keen on it, or you might try it in a different way. And if you keep offering things repeatedly, then they are more likely to try it, and you might want to offer it alongside foods that they do like. I have a story. My friend, this was years ago, came round with her little boy, and I went to offer him some broccoli, and he looked at me like, oh yeah, okay. And she turned around and said, oh no, Alex doesn't like broccoli. And I was like, so you've just reinforced to him that he doesn't like broccoli, not let him decide for himself. And I think it's really, it's natural that we do those things, but just being a bit mindful about it can be really helpful. Okay, Amelia, it's 10 past. Yes. I'm conscious of time. Let's crack on to some questions.
Okay.
And we've got the slides that I can share about eating well as a family, but it's a lot of the principles we've already talked about.
Brilliant. I think one of the questions we've had already was, are the slides going to be available later? So absolutely, we'll make sure that you'll get all of the slides. So any of the bits that we didn't get a chance to get through, you can have a look over. And if anything you want to refer back to, you'll have access to those slides. I'll have a look through. If anyone does have any other questions that you would like to ask Fran, if you could pop them in the chat box now, that would be brilliant. I can see we had one earlier, so I'll just read this out for Fran to answer. It's our 2.5-year-old wants honey on everything. How much should we try to limit this? Are there any better alternatives?
Okay, that's a really good question. And honey is delicious. And as a 2.5-year-old, of course you want everything. So that's normal. I think honey is classified as a free sugar, and so the same as coconut sugar, the same as maple syrup, the same as agave. Like, they might be more expensive, and they might be marketed to be healthier, but they exert exactly the same effect on your body and your child's body as your bog standard table sugar. So, you know, we want to limit the amount of free sugars that your child is having. So I think it's about 5 grams of free sugars a day, which is about a teaspoon. So you probably want to be trying to limit it to a teaspoon, no more than that. And again, babies and toddlers we're designed to like sweet foods, because that's what our taste buds like, and the more sweet things that they get, the more they don't want those. So maybe trying things like sweet fruits, like some strawberries or banana or blueberries, or something that is going to add a sweet taste but is had less free sugars, essentially.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Fran. Okay, I can see we've had another question. My little one loves eggs and cheese. How much is too much?
Okay, well, eggs are a great source of protein, and cheese is a good source of protein and also calcium. So it's, a dairy food as well. You want to be giving a balanced diet. So if they only have eggs and they're not having chicken or beans or fish or meat, then introducing more variety is useful. And the same with cheese. You might want to offer cheese if they're having 3 meals a day. It might be you offer some once a day or every other day, and you offer a variety of different dairy foods as well. But in terms of at a meal, if you give them half an egg and they want another half of an egg, then let them guide you to how much they want. But if they're having eggs, they want them at every meal, then that's when you want to get more variety in, because different foods gives us a different range of nutrients and vitamins and minerals.
Okay. My child has stopped eating a lot of foods that he used to eat. Should I be worried that one day he is only eating his snacks and not a full meal? He's 3 in June.
Okay, so he's stopping eating lots of foods, and you're worried that he's just going to be wanting snacks rather than meals.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
So I would say, going back to having a routine, so having set meal times and a set number of snacks that you're offering helps to develop their hunger as well, and means that they're more likely to have a variety of foods. And being limited in what they want at a meal time is really, really normal. So I wouldn't worry about it, and go back to, keep offering, giving them variety, putting a range of you deciding what goes on the table and them deciding what goes on their plate. And if for a period of time that's a bit limited, it's not, don't worry too much about it, and don't keep pressuring them to have more and try more, but keep offering it to them, I think, because there will be periods where they'll just want pasta and cheese, and that is really, really normal. But giving them, saying, oh, pasta's not on the menu tonight, why don't we have that tomorrow night? Tonight we're going to have some mashed potato and broccoli and chicken or something, and then you put that on the table. They might decide just to have some potato, and that's okay.
Great, thank you, Fran. I think we've got time for a couple more questions.
Whilst you do that, I'm just going to quickly flick through. If you're having a quick look through the questions, I'm just going to flick through this build a balanced plate. This is a principle that's quite a nice way of looking at how you build a plate, and looking at having different varieties of fruit and veg, including fish if you eat it twice a week, including a portion of oily fish, switching to more plant-based sources of protein, having whole grains for children under the age of 2. You want to have a variety of whole grain and white, so you don't want to just have whole grain under 2. But yeah, I just thought I'd flick through those quickly.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks, Fran. Maybe we'll do one more question, and then unfortunately any of the questions that we don't have time to answer this evening, we'll make sure that we address a few of those when we send the slides over to you, to make sure that we respond to everybody, because unfortunately we don't have time to cover everything this evening. If we end with, how can I get my daughter to do more baby-led weaning at home? At nursery, she eats melon, peppers, and a variety of fresh fruit and vegetables, but at home she rejects them, but she'll eat them in a meal with mash or pasta. Do I just keep offering them alongside her meals?
Yeah, really nice question, and yes is the answer. One thing that comes up quite a lot when I speak to families with children at nursery is, they always eat loads more at nursery than they do at home, and there are a number of reasons because of this, or could be why this happens. So one is that they're looking at other kids eating those foods, and they'll think, well, they are eating them, I'll eat them too. Another one is sometimes there's less focus on them. Nurseries are busy, and people who work at nurseries don't have time to sit in with one child and see what they're eating, and so a less focus can mean less stress and more willingness to try. Everyone's eating together, so they're all sit there eating, so again, that means that they're more likely to try stuff. And there's routine as well. There's set routine, and some, you know, they're not going to be offered at nursery, they're not going to be offered a different meal if they don't like that meal. And so there's that kind of, there is that expectation of this is what I'm having. So in terms of, yeah, maybe offer some of those fruits as a starter before you have the other meal, so they've got those to try. And again, you know, obviously be around to check with choking risk, but do other things, or sit and have a chat with them and eat a little bit yourself, and don't focus on how she's doing and how much she's eating is a good way of doing it.
Great, thank you. Okay, just a few things before we end the session. Thank you so much for everybody who did send in their questions. I'm really sorry to the people that we didn't get to. As I said, we'll try and answer them after the session via email. Just a few things to note. Don't forget that the webinar will be uploaded onto our website shortly, so do look out for that. You will be receiving an email from us shortly as well, containing a feedback survey. We'd greatly appreciate it if you could take the time to complete this, as it will help us to improve our future webinars and events. I would also like to take this opportunity to make you aware of some of the exciting upcoming events that we have at Hopscotch. This summer, we're hoping to invite our families and staff to join us in a local beach clean. We're going to be partnering with the local charitable organisation, Sussex Dolphin Project, to host the event. So we're looking forward to hopefully see a few of you there. Also, our Hopscotch Summer Fete is something to look out for in the coming months as well. To keep up to date with all of these events, please follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Hopscotch Nurseries. I'd like to say a massive thank you to Fran for hosting this session. I feel like I've learned so much, and I hope you all have too.
Thank you.
It's been brilliant, and I'd also like to say a massive thank you to all of you for joining us. I really hope you've enjoyed this session, and I look forward to seeing you at our future events. Once again, thank you for joining us. I hope you've had a great evening.
Thank you as well, everyone. Thanks for coming along. And just quickly, I am on Instagram. I have the Brighton Nutritionist, but I also have a new business which is called Performance Canteen, which looks at older kids. So it's around teen nutrition, especially active teens. So check out that. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Bye.